Amr minkum does not mean that. Ulil Amr minkum means that these people, they have such a high control over their nafs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them control over the environment around them. The more control you have over your nafs, the more control Allah gives to your environment around you. This is not just limited to the prophets, dear brothers and sisters, or the imams, or the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like I said, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, in the general sense, applies to all of humanity. We are meant to be Khalifatullahi fil ard. We are meant to rule this earth. But the famous Sayyid Bihishti, who was the first Supreme Court Justice of the Islamic Republic of Iran, he says in his book, which was co-authored by himself and Shahid Bahunat, who says in the first chapter that mankind, if he wants to submit to God, he can be better than the angels of God. Yet if he does not submit to God, he is worse than the worst of beasts of the wilderness. Alaykum salam. So this is what Allah gives us, or His followers. And then He gives more to the Imams based off of their submission and to the prophets of God. وَبِسُلْطَانِكَ الَّذِي عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and by that, and by your authority which extends over everything. وَبِوَجْهِكَ الْبَاقِي بَعْدَ فَنَاءِ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. وَبِوَجْهِكَ الْبَاقِي, and by thou, and by your countenance, باقي, which remains, بَعْدَ فَنَاءِ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, after everything has been kicked to the dust. Now, what does this mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. I mentioned yesterday the examples of philosophical concepts like Wahdatul Wujud and Wahdatul Mutlaq, whereby they say, Wahdatul Wujud, for example, says the only necessarily existent being is Allah. The only being that is necessarily existent is God. Therefore, He is the only being that possesses wujud. Compared to His being, our being is nothing. God is eternal. He does not need somebody to make Him. He does not need somebody to create Him. He does not need somebody to mold Him into a shape. But we need Him. Which is why many of the people, they don't understand what the Urafa are saying, because they are not at the level of fana. When you're at the level of fana or baqa, there is no hijab between you and God. And you see the divine reality in such a way that you are obliged to submit to Him. And by that, I don't mean you see God with your physical eyes. That's not possible. Physical eyes, like I said before, set limitations. The mind even sets limitations. But you can see God with the eyes of the mind. Amir al-Mu'mineen said that I do not worship a God I cannot see, So one of his companions say, Ya Ali, how do you see God? He says, I don't see him with my physical eyes. I see him with the eyes of my mind. I see him with the eyes of my heart. I see him with the eyes of my heart. When we say we follow this path, dear brothers and sisters, then let there remain no doubt that our existence is nothing. We are not we're not even the mirror that reflects the image of God, as Abu Hassan al-Shuhsani would say. And let me remove a misconception. Some of the misconception against tasawwuf that occurs from Ahlul Zahir is that they say that Ahlul Tasawwuf and Irfan, they go against Sharia. No, they have their own understanding of what Sharia is, and they follow that understanding of it. So, for example, Dr. Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who was a student of Allama Tabatabai, met Imam Khomeini, met Shahid Bihish, Shahid Mutahari, Shahid Bihish, you don't know all of them. He says that fiqh to irfan or tasawwuf is this. Imagine a circle. I'm drawing a circle, the outlines of a circle in front of you. The outline of the circle is Sharia. He goes further. The radius that goes from any one point of the outline of the circle to the center is what they call in Sufism the tariqah. And the center of the circle is haqiqah. Another example, they say this is very deep example. Another example they say is that you have a walnut, right? A walnut has two parts to it: a hard, insurmountable outer element and a fleshy, delicious, savory inner element. Sharia is like that hard shell which protects the inner reality of religion. And the tariqah and the haqiqah are that inner fleshy, delicious part of Islam that really give it meaning. Another example I can give, please recite a salawat. Please get a seat for the brother who's coming in. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum. Now, another example. Irfan and Tasawwuf are the private and personal aspects of a social religion, whereby if you want to treat Islam or religions in a two, and I'm making this very one-dimensional, but this is for the purpose of an example. If you want to make Islam into a very understandable reality, on the horizontal level, you have the Sharia, which encompasses every human being, applies to everybody. On the vertical level, you have the haqiqah, which goes to the inner psychology and psychiatry and the inner nature of every human being, and applies it to every human being. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I believe I have 15 more minutes, so inshallah I will try to sum up everything in 15 minutes. وَبِأَسْمَائِكَ الَّذِي مَلَأَتْ وَبِأَسْمَائِكَ الَّتِي مَلَأَتْ أَرْكَانَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And by your names, that which manifests your power over all things. Your names. What does this mean? I mentioned yesterday, Dua Jawshan Kabir has 1,000 names of God. And in the hadith we say there are 99 names of God. In Shiism we say there are an infinite number of names of God, but the Asma al-A'zam are 14. What is Ism, first of all? If I say Safi, you imagine somebody looking like this? I hope it's a good looking guy that you're thinking of when you say it's Safi. Jazakallah khair. As long as Brother Ali approves. So you look, a name is a sign that points to a reality. I say Abdullah, for example. Your name comes to somebody, for example, the sign comes to somebody, for example, the father of Rasulullah. Abu Talib, another example. Ali, another example. Names always point to a reality. The reason why we say that there are infinite number of names of God is because the whole universe points to the reality of God. The whole universe is itself a name of God. Everything in itself is a name of God. So the names of God are infinite. But within those names of God, there are 14 Asma'ul A'zam, the highest names of God. And the name that incorporates all the characteristics of the divine, the Asma'ul Jalala, is Allah. Asma'ul Jalala is Allah. The highest of the Asma'ul Jalala is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That name, which is the highest name, and I mentioned at the beginning of this sessions that we had when we started the tafsir of Dua Kumail, Allahumma, Allah, it does not have an equivalent in the English language. Why? Because when we say Allahumma, for example, it translates to oh God. But like I said, oh God, God could be gods, could be goddess, could be any deity you worship. But Allah is that sublime reality that nobody can deny, that is above all of creation, that everybody in their innate nature testifies to. Asma are infinite. Asma al-A'azam are 14. And the highest of the Asma al-Jalala is Allah. There's a reason why, and people just mentioned two of the names of God mentioned in the ayah. There's a reason why 114 surahs of the Quran and 113 begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The phrase Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is actually mentioned exactly 114 times in the Quran, twice in one surah. And the phrase the Basmala, as they say in Arabic, Bismillah, Rahman ar-Rahim is shortened, they say Basmala. People, they usually say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to be recognized by Rahman ar-Rahim. But the first name that Allah mentions in this ayah is Allah. Bismillah. So Allah wants to be also recognized by His Jalala and His power and His strength and His majesty. Praise salawat. وَبِعِلْمِكَ الَّذِي أَحَاطَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. and by your knowledge that pervades over all things. All things are part of the knowledge of God. There's nothing that's hidden from Him. There's a caveat to this though. Because if God is all knowing, then technically speaking, He should know what I am doing tomorrow or the day after that. He should know what food we are getting for iftar today. He should know that what which one of us is getting up for Salat al-Fajr, for example. He should know that from the students who has a test tomorrow and who doesn't. He should know that who's going to spend the all-nighter studying and who doesn't. This conception of the all-knowing God brought a problem in the Muslim world. It was a historical problem. Ashari, Mu'tazili, Ja'fari, they all had their own views on this. This is the qada and qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah is all-knowing, Allah is wasi'un alim, then why is it that I have to put an effort to do whatever I want to do tomorrow? If Allah is all-knowing, then what about the agency of free will? If Allah is all-knowing, free will is nothing. But then the Asharis argued this point, and from them stemmed the schools of Sunnah. The Mu'tazilis, who rose around the time of the uprising of the Abbasids because they were opposed to the Banu Umayyah who supported Asharism, they say complete free will. As if free will was a law that God was bound to. And then the Shia, they say that predestination is Umawi and complete free will is Abbasi, rather a path between the two paths. Let me explain it this way. Imagine in the old days we used to have reels of film. Yes? You guys have iPad and I don't know, whatnot, iPhone and MacBook Pro and everything. They don't know anything. In the old days, we used to have the videotape. Yes? And you can open the videotape and you see the reel of film that the video is transcribed on. So Allah, in this case, has created an infinite number of reel of films that He has left for each and every single one of us. But He has left it for us to decide which reel of film that we follow. He has left it to us to decide. So technically, He knows everything. He knows all of it. But the agency of free will is maintained within this concept. He is still the perfect creator. And then finally, وَبِنُورِ وَجْهِكَ الَّذِي أَضَاءَ لَهُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and by the light of your countenance, which illuminates everything. By the light of your countenance, which illuminates everything. We are nothing. If Allah uses us as a vessel for guidance, it's His light. I am just an empty vessel. Allah is the light, and indeed, He is the light of lights. He is the perfect light. He is the absolute light. From absolute unity cannot stem anything other than absolute unity. He is that absolute unity who created from him his Nur, Nur Muhammadi, and from the gradation of Nur, he created all of existence. Why? If God is absolute light, and look, I don't mean this light. This light is finite. I don't mean the thing that has two properties, wave-like properties and matter-like properties. I don't mean that. I don't mean the light of the sun that travels through empty space. No. I don't mean the light of quasars and supernova, the Jovian planets, and everything else, or the light of the moon. Because his light is absolute. These are just symbols that we use. And indeed, in the one last Muharram, I conclude with this point, the ayah of Nur says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. I'm not gonna butcher the ayah. So if I explain the general meaning, I hope it gets the point. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The example of his light is that it is in a niche, in a lamp, in the lantern, and it is light upon lights. So why is it that when we say that we're talking about God, that religious people like who put on this Abba and Amama, somehow we think that, na'udhu billah, we are God. Why is it that if I'm just the vessel, that the takabbur comes in and my shoulders come high and I'd be like, okay, now I am such and such a person. So shoulders should be always low, because the lower the shoulders, the more humble you are. And the bigger the responsibility, the more humility that is needed to fulfill that responsibility. Three examples and I finish this point, just to prove this point. In Pakistan, we had a scholar by the name of Shaheed Arif Hussain al-Hussaini, Imam Khomeini's first representative to Pakistan. When he was given the qayadat by Imam Khomeini of the Shia of Pakistan, he delivered an hour and a half speech as to why he should not be the leader of the Muslims of Pakistan. Because that required extreme humility. Unfortunately, the politicians of today, if you express extreme humility, they run you over. But the idea is, the more humble you are, the more fit you are for the position that you yourself say you don't deserve. Another example, Ayatollah Khamenei, for example, in Iran, when he became supreme leader, for an hour he said, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. I'm not qualified, I don't deserve it, don't nominate me. What happened? The one who the Urafa recognized, Jawadi Amali recognized, those who were in the Majlis al-Khubragan recognize that the one who is the most humble deserves that position the most. And the final example is of a marja living in Najaf al-Ashraf, Ayatollah Bashir Najafi. He says, no marja al-taqleed ever wants to become marja al-taqleed. Because the niyabat of Imam Mahdi is such a difficult responsibility that nobody in their right mind would ever say that they want to become marja taqlid if they are marja bil haqq. So let us work on the principles of humility in our day-to-day lives. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Salawat ala Muhammad. I believe that is exactly 30 minutes.